On August 8, 1944, in the vicinity of Saintes, south of Caen in Normandy, France, the leather of his commander's gloves squeaked as Hauptmann Michael Wittmann clung tightly to the cupola of Tiger 007, surveying the hedgerow-fringed skyline through his Zeiss optics. His hands shook, not out of terror, but from an understanding that had been building since the early morning. They keep coming, dear God. They simply do not stop advancing. Over a span of 3 hours, his platoon of 4 Tiger tanks had knocked out Shermans one after another. 27 burning wrecks were scattered across the areas bordering the Conflans Road. Each Tiger was credited with no fewer than 6 destroyed enemy tanks. According to every lesson on battlefield tactics he absorbed at the Panzer Troop School, their side was clearly prevailing. The kill ratio was exceptional, almost 7-to-1. Nevertheless, through his binoculars, Wittmann spied 48 additional Shermans pressing forward from 3 separate directions, each one manned by untested crews with their ammunition stores fully loaded. Columns of dust trailing behind them hinted that many more vehicles were drawing near. All 4 Tigers, in total, were down to perhaps a dozen armor-piercing shells among them. They lacked the fuel for substantial repositioning, and there would be no reinforcements. The equation for destruction was now being calculated not in the clashes of individual machines, but in the cold numbers of production rates that rendered tactical excellence meaningless. What Wittmann observed, as did every German tank officer across all fronts, was no mere engagement, but an exhibition of industrial mathematics destined to overwhelm the Wehrmacht through sheer weight of numbers. Only a few moments later, Michael Wittmann would be killed, his renowned Tiger destroyed either by a Sherman Firefly from the 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry or by Canadian troops. Which side it was still divides historians, but his last radio message, transmitted at exactly 1,247 hours, would encapsulate the hopelessness felt by every German panzer commander confronting American output. Ammunition finished, enemy unlimited. The saga of German armored dominance had started on May 26, 1941 at the Berghof, Hitler's Alpine residence. Ferdinand Porsche and Henschel & Son unveiled their prototypes that would evolve into the Tiger tank. Hitler, entranced by the huge 88mm main gun and the armor that no Allied tank could pierce, immediately gave the order to manufacture. This vehicle, Hitler proclaimed to his gathered generals, would be equivalent to an entire battalion of standard tanks. 1 Tiger would account for a dozen enemy machines. The Führer directive that followed locked in Germany's tragic error. Superiority in quality would defeat sheer numbers. Every Tiger was to be an engineering marvel, painstakingly assembled by experts, unmatched on the battlefield. According to Hitler, the Americans, lacking German technical skill, could never equal their quality. Their tanks, as propaganda minister Goebbels declared, would be nothing more than Detroit sheet metal on treads. The initial Tiger was completed at Henschel's Castle factory on August 4, 1942. The construction required 300,000 hours of labor. The assembly involved the installation of 26,000 separate components by the workforce. Artisans meticulously hand-fitted the transmission. Armor plates required days of effort from accomplished welders. The interleaved wheel arrangement by itself, an engineering feat meant to distribute the hefty 57-ton weight of the tank, called for such exacting assembly that only seasoned workers could perform it. Oberst Wolfgang Tamala, who observed the debut Tiger's test run at Kumdorf, noted in his report, "This vehicle embodies the height of German engineering. No adversary can withstand it. Should we be able to turn out 100 per month, victory is assured." Germany, however, would not achieve monthly output of 100 Tigers at any time. The largest monthly quantity ever reached was 104 units in April 1944, following 2 years spent refining production. By that stage, U.S. plants were turning out 2,000 Sherman tanks each month. The narrative of American tank manufacturing started not through formal military strategy but via a telephone conversation. On May 28, 1940, William Cudson, one-time president of General Motors, answered a call from President Roosevelt. "Bill," the president stated, I'd like you to come to Washington. We must manufacture 50,000 planes and 50,000 tanks. Hudson's answer would become the foundation for the American approach to production. Mr. President, we are not capable of manufacturing the finest planes and tanks, but we are able to build the largest number of planes and tanks, and we will make them so any young man from Iowa could repair them with just a wrench and a screwdriver. The Sherman tank was the direct result of these ideals. At a development session at Aberdeen Proving Ground on August 31, 1940, Army Ordnance outlined demands that shocked established military designers but pleased Detroit's industrial planners. Easy enough that untrained laborers could assemble the parts, with all components interchangeable among variants. Engines needed to accommodate various fuels. Armor should be able to be welded instead of fitting with utmost precision. Tracks designed so crews could replace them in the field. A turret ring sufficiently large for upgrades down the road. Major General Gladian Barnes, commanding Army Ordnance, addressed the gathered contractors. I don't expect a flawless tank. I seek a competent tank that we can build 1,000 of for every 100 that Germany completes. Make it durable, make it straightforward to repair, and construct them in numbers reaching the tens of thousands. The difference between the German and American methods of production became clear within their manufacturing facilities. At Henchel's Castle factory, 9,000 expert laborers strove to create tigers. The assembly lines resembled a vast medieval guild converted to industrial scale. Senior artisans managed their apprentices. Every tank was in effect made almost entirely by hand. Completed parts bore workers' signatures as a mark of their individual pride. Untidier Franz Lehart, formerly employed at the Castle factory prior to his conscription, reflected later, "We devoted 3 full days solely to the final drive. Micrometers checked each gear meticulously. Welding passed 3 separate inspections. Identification numerals were hand-painted. This was far from mass production. It was a form of artistry." At Chrysler's Detroit Tank Arsenal, which began operations on September 15, 1941, the situation was dramatically unlike what was expected. Spanning 1.25 million square feet, this facility was larger than all of Germany's tank production plants added together. Rather than skilled artisans, the labor force was made up of ex-automotive workers, homemakers, adolescents, and anyone capable of learning to use a welding torch or riveting tool. Rose Willow Monroe, later known as Rosie the Riveter, was engaged in constructing Shermans at this plant. She would later recount her time there. "I had never laid eyes on a tank prior to working on them. We received 2 days of instruction and then were sent straight to the assembly line. Each task was simplified into basic steps. I would weld one joint, then the tank would be pushed ahead, and another worker would tackle the following weld. Completing a tank took us 4 hours. The Detroit Tank Arsenal managed an accomplishment that German engineers had deemed unattainable: the mass production of tanks by assembly line. Chrysler's engineers implemented automobile industry methods by dividing the Sherman into prefabricated modules. Different sub-assemblies were constructed concurrently on separate lines before being united for final completion. The duration from raw steel to fully built tank amounted to 48 hours. Reaching December 1942, the output numbers were already presenting a narrative German military intelligence did not accept. The Detroit facility alone turned out 896 Shermans monthly, over twice the number indicated in several German intelligence assessments. Throughout the United States, 11 manufacturing plants were producing Shermans. Detroit Tank Arsenal, Chrysler, with 896 monthly by December 1942. Grand Blanc Tank Arsenal Fisher Body at 385 a month. Lima Locomotive Works at 165 monthly. Pressed Steel Car Company, 320 per month. Pacific Car and Foundry, 280 per month. Federal Machine and Welder, 240 monthly. American Locomotive Company, 310 monthly. Baldwin Locomotive Works, 205 monthly. Pullman Standard Car Company, 385 per month. Montreal Locomotive Works in Canada, 180 monthly. Angus Shops in Canada, 145 per month. The grand total of Shermans produced each month by December 1942 was about 3,500 units. In contrast, German Tiger tank monthly output for the same timeframe was 34 tanks. This meant the ratio was already 103-1. Generalmajor Heinz Guderian, Inspector General of Armored Troops, received these production figures from intelligence reports in January 1943. His diary noted briefly, "If these production numbers are even half correct, the war is already lost for us." This difference in manufacturing capacity triggered numerous additional effects that increased the American upper hand. With thousands of Shermans in circulation, American armored crews could practice with real tanks. At Kentucky's Fort Knox, the Armored Force School had several hundred Shermans used exclusively for instruction. Tank crews participated in intensive 12-week training programs covering every element of the machine. They fired off thousands of rounds for gunnery exercises. Their driving practice covered many hundreds of miles. They maintained their vehicles until they were able to replace every part by feel alone. Private First Class Clarence Smuyer, in training at Fort Knox during 1943, later shared, "We put those training Shermans through the ringer. Ran them until they broke, repaired them, and did it all over again. By the time we went overseas, I understood that tank inside and out, better than my family's farm tractor. Every noise it made, I knew its meaning, and which tool to use for each repair." Tank crew instruction in Germany took a distinctly different path. Tiger tank manufacturing barely topped 100 per month at best, so there were scarcely any tanks for crew training. Panzer troops stationed at Putlow had access to only 4 Tiger tanks for training. This meant 4 vehicles to teach tank crews for every Tiger formation in the Wehrmacht. Gerrit Kurt Klenny, belonging to Schwer Panzerabteilung 503, spoke of his own instruction. "We had access to a real Tiger for only 3 days. Most of those 3 days were spent examining blueprints and training in wooden cockpit replicas. When our unit finally received its Tigers in the Russian theater, half the personnel had never so much as started a Maybach engine." The technological complexity only reinforced the challenge. The Sherman comprised 15,000 separate parts and required 50 tools for repair work in the field. The Tiger, by comparison, had 26,000 parts and necessitated 230 unique tools. Americans could train their crews to a functional level in 4 weeks. German Tiger tank crews had to train for 3 months just to reach basic capability, a luxury of time that the Wehrmacht did not possess. June 6, 1944, D-Day, signified the onset of the numerical calculation that would cripple the armored forces of Germany. The Allied troops landed with a force of 4,000 tanks, the majority being Shermans, while an additional 8,000 waited in England to be transported. Opposed to this, the Germans had gathered their finest units. Out of a total of 1,347 Tigers manufactured since 1942, only about 430 were in working order across all theaters. In Normandy alone, German forces could deploy a mere 102 Tigers. SSO Ashimura from the formation Schwerer SS Panzer AB Talong 101 experienced this situation firsthand near Caen on June 7. "We knocked out 8 Shermans during the clash that morning. By the afternoon, another 16 had replaced them. We took out 6 of those replacements. As night fell, more fresh units kept coming in. They appeared like swarms of ants. You could trample on dozens, then hundreds. Behind them stood thousands more." The pace of replacements exposed the truth. If America lost a Sherman, another would be shipped from England within 2 days. Colonel Joseph Gillam's system of replacements kept a backup of 2,300 Shermans in depots in Britain. Tanks that had been damaged were fixed by mobile repair teams in only a few hours or simply exchanged for brand new machines. For Germany, every Tiger destroyed meant a replacement that would take weeks or even months, if one became available at all. Transporting a Tiger needed special railcars. The route from Germany to Normandy, at best, required 5 days. Air raids by Allied forces often lengthened this process to several weeks. Out of 45 Tigers sent to Normandy during June 1944, just 17 completed the journey undamaged.